All right. Very warm welcome to all of you once again. And we would now be commencing with the fifth installment of the Russian Revolution series. In the previous installment, we had seen the backdrop of the revolution, as in, we wanted to first understand what did the Russian Empire look like in 1914. We saw who Tsar Nicholas II was. He was essentially the ruler of Russia. We also saw what parts did the Russian Empire cover, right? And we saw what the major religion was. So it was just a backdrop or just an introduction to what Russia looked like at that point of time. And then we also realized the fact that Russia in general was quite quite poor when compared to its European counterparts. Yes, right. So moving further, today we would be exploring the economy and the society. Okay, the economy and the society of Russia. ठीक है? The economy and the society of Russia during that point of time, like again in the backdrop, okay, in the backdrop of the revolution, before the revolution actually happened, what did the economy of Russia look like, and what was the Russian society? How did that function? Yeah, perfect. So we're going to take it step by step. There's nothing to worry about. We're going to take it step by step. Yes, and we're going to figure out the logic behind things, and we're going to see how things look like. Yeah, so if we were to consider long time ago, once upon a time, okay, in the beginning of the 20th century, right, in the beginning of the 20th century ka matlab hai, it means early 1900s. Okay, in the early 1900s, if we were to look at the major occupation, okay, if we were to look at the major occupation of the Russian citizens, the major occupation of the Russian citizens was agriculture. Is that understood? Okay. During the early 1900s, the major occupation of the Russian people living in Russia and the Russian Empire was agriculture. All right. And by when I say the major occupation was agriculture, I mean to the tune of 85% of the people who were living in Russia were agriculturalists, were farmers, were peasants. You may call them anything that you want. They earned their living through agriculture essentially. Now, this is a bit weird because if I compare it to other European countries like France and Germany, all right, if I compare it to other European countries like France and Germany, you will realize that in France, the percentage of people who were directly involved in agriculture was just 40%. And in Germany, it was at least half, so 50% of the population was involved in agriculture. But in Russia, it's a staggering 85%. Yeah, so that's a pretty huge number, almost the entire population, so to speak. Yes. Now, if you look at their market, so basically, the people who were involved in agriculture, they did two things. They produced grain for themselves, as in for their own needs, for their own sustenance, right? For their own sustenance, and they of course also exported grain. Okay, Russia was one of the largest exporters. Okay, one of the largest exporters of food grain. Okay, so that is something that is in their favor. Russia was one of the largest exporters of food grain. ठीक है. Now this is regarding agriculture. Now if I talk about industry, all right, if I talk about industry, initially in Russia was not highly industrialized. Okay, Russia was not highly industrialized initially. Okay, I am using the word initially for a reason. Okay, initially it was not highly industrialized. Industry was majorly found in pockets, मतलब काफी scattered था, ठीक है? It was quite scattered. Okay, and the two major, now this is something that you might want to remember. If somebody asks you what were the major pockets of industry that were present in the Russian Empire, then there are two prominent areas that will come to mind. One is the capital of Moscow. Okay, one is the capital of Moscow, and the other is the beautiful city of St. Petersburg. Okay, one is the beautiful city of St. Petersburg, right? So there were two pockets essentially. One was Moscow itself, the capital, and the other was St. Petersburg. But something started to change. Okay, this was initially that the industry was not highly developed, but then something started to change from the 1890s. Okay, 1890s. There's no need to learn the precise date over here. What started happening from the 1890s was Russia's railway network started to expand. Okay, what was happening? Russia's railway network started to expand. Are you understanding what is happening now? अब क्या हो रहा है कि now the railway is going to expand. So think a little logically. It will be easier to set up industries, right? It will be easier to set up industries. Trains will help transportation of raw materials. Trains will also help take the finished material out of the factory to the cities, towns, villages, what have you. Okay, so etc. etc. Right, so basically trains are now going to play a huge role in the industrialization of Russia. Right, so the railway network is now expanding, right? Is it making sense to you? ठीक है, this thing is happening. Now what is happening is since the railway is expanding, foreign investment in industry, all right, foreign investment in industry, in factories, all right, foreign investment increased. Okay, foreign investment in industry had increased. Coal production doubled. So things are looking up for Russia. Okay, like they're doing well for themselves. So coal production has doubled. In fact, to the extent that iron and steel production had quadrupled. Okay, that is increased 4x. ठीक है, so the coal production doubled, iron and steel production quadrupled. Things are looking bright and nice and shiny for Russia. Okay, and it is looking good for them. Okay, now what had happened was initially, if I talk about in the beginning, initially craftsmen produced all goods by hand, produced most of the goods by hand. Okay, produced most of the goods by hand. But now what had started to happen is that craftsmen and factory workers, like your regular factory labor, okay, craftsmen and factory workers were almost equal in number. Yes, so now craftsmen and factory workers were almost equal in number. This is the sort of change that was happening in the Russian economy just because of the advent of railways in the 1890s. Does that make sense? Okay, does that make sense to you? I think it is fairly understandable and it is fairly commonsensical, so to speak. Yes, I don't know whether that's a word. ठीक है, perfect. Now what is happening over here is, okay, now if you look at the industrial setup in Russia, okay, most industry was private property. Of course it was private property. Okay, most industry was private property. ठीक है, that is a feature number one. But government intervention was there. Okay, government intervention was there. Government tried to make sure, or tried to ensure, okay, government tried to ensure that minimum wages were given, okay, that minimum wages were paid rather to the workers, and that the working hours were normal. Okay, and the working hours were normal, so to speak. Yes, ठीक है. So the government tried to make sure that minimum wages were paid and the working hours were normal, but this was not implemented properly. Of course it was not implemented properly. ठीक है. अगर implement होता ढंग से, if it would have been implemented properly, then there would have been no reason for anyone to have had a revolution. Okay, so now this was not implemented properly. Sorry, Holly's barking in the background. Okay, fine. I hope that didn't create any disturbance. So it was not implemented properly. Basically, what was happening is in your small workshops and in your little craft units, okay, the working day sometimes stretched to 15 hours. In some cases, it stretched to 18 hours. Okay, accommodation was pathetic. People lived without sanitation. Now you begin to realize it is the same problem, all of those problems which socialism was trying to tackle. Okay, it is the same problem which socialism was essentially trying to tackle. It crept into the Russian industrial setup as well. So basically, workers were living a sad life in a nutshell. ठीक है, workers were living a sad life. अच्छा, now if we talk about the workers themselves, okay, if we talk about the workers themselves, they were sort of a divided group. Okay, it is funny. So workers were a divided social group, and what do I mean by that? What do I mean by that? They were divided on the basis of skill. Okay, workers were divided on the basis of skill. Okay, apparently in their hierarchy, the most elite workers, okay, in their hierarchy, the most elite workers were the metal workers. Okay, the most elite workers were the metal workers. So they considered themselves to be superior to the rest of the workers. Okay, so they considered themselves to be superior to the rest of the workers, right? There was also division on the basis of the way people dressed. Okay, there was division amongst the workers on the way they dressed, on their manners, etc., which is really funny and slightly bizarre, right? And also during this time, what had happened was workers started setting up their own associations. Okay, say for example, Metal Workers Association, Coal Workers Association, Cobblers Association, just an example. Okay, so they started setting up their own associations. What did this association do? They tried to help fellow members. Yes, they tried to help fellow members during difficult times, during unemployment, during famine, during this, during that, blah blah blah. Unemployment, financial crisis, you know the rest, etc. Okay, so workers have started to form associations. So this is essentially the story of the workers, right? So if somebody asks you, can you comment on the hierarchy or the division between workers in the Russian industrial setup, then of course you would be able to say that yes, they were a divided social group. They were divided on the basis of skill. Most elite workers were the metal workers. There was also differentiation on the basis of dress, clothing, manners, etc., and blah blah blah, right? So you get the point. Okay, now despite all of this, there's a silver lining. Despite all of this, there is a silver lining. The silver lining is that the workers usually got together. Okay, the silver lining is that the workers usually got together, okay, to strike. ठीक है, हड़ताल जिसे बोलते हैं. ठीक है, workers usually got together to strike. Strike could be for various reasons. Number one, disagreement with your employer. disagreement with your employer. Now this could be regarding anything, your wages, your working conditions, working hours, whatever. Okay, so disagreement with the employer, sad working conditions. Okay, sad working conditions, long working hours, etc. Right? So essentially striking together, right? In unity. ठीक है. Now, if we were to look at some dates over here, some nice, of course, dates bring joy, don't they? Right? So, if you were to look at the dates, these strikes were quite frequent. Now, if we talk about the textile industry in Russia, okay, if we look at the textile industry in Russia, strikes took place in roughly around 1896 to 97, okay? And in the metal industry, where the metal workers were there, this strike took place in the year of 1902. All right. I'm just going to box them so that you can note them down separately somewhere. Not really important, but still can add a lot of value to your answers. Okay, so this was a situation with the workers in Russia. Now there is another very important part of the working class, very important component of the working class, and those are the ones which produce our food, and those are the peasants. Right? Peasants followed a similar hierarchy. Okay, they cultivated the land. Okay, they cultivated the land, right? But they did not own the land. Okay, big difference. They cultivated it, but they did not own the land. तो land कौन own करता था? Land own करती थी nobility. Nobility owned the land. The royalty owned the land, and of course, the church, as in the clergy, owned the land. So the peasants used to work for these folks. Okay? They used to work for their masters. Now the weird thing about peasants was that they were also divided. Okay? Peasants were also divided based on social structures. Okay? They were divided. They were deeply religious people. Matlab they loved Jesus. Okay? They were deeply religious. Okay? They had no respect. Okay? They had no respect for the nobility. Right? They had no respect for the nobility. Matlab they just really did not care for the nobility. They had zero respect because nobility was not chosen on the basis of merit. Okay? कि अगर आप बहुत स्मार्ट हो या बहुत इंटेलिजेंट हो तो यू कैनॉट बिकम नोबिलिटी. नोबिलिटी वॉज बिकॉज यू वर क्लोज टू द जार. ओके, सो एसेंशियली बिकॉज ऑफ योर पावर एंड पोजिशन, because of power and position and loyalty to the Tsar, you became a noble in Russia, not because you were super talented or something. Okay, perfect. Now since they did not own the land, peasants का क्या demand था? Demanded ownership of their own land. Okay, now are you able to make sense? It is pretty logical. They demanded ownership of their own land. Okay, they demanded ownership of their own land. Soon what happened was धीरे करके by 1902 most of the peasants were disillusioned. Okay, most of the peasants were disillusioned, stopped paying rent on the land. Okay, stopped paying tributes to the nobility, and here is when things started getting a little bloody. They even started murdering their landlords. This is a little dark. Okay, they started murdering their landlords, and by 1905 these incidents started occurring super frequently. Okay, these incidents that I mentioned, stopping of paying rents, disrespect towards the nobility, murdering of landlords, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so this started happening like super fast, like super occasionally. Okay, great. Now, what was this one interesting, unique feature about Russian peasants? Okay. super unique feature, which can of course be asked, super unique feature about the Russian peasants, very interesting feature, okay, which was different from the rest of the European peasants, okay. Peasants that were living together in a certain geographical area, okay, came together, and what they did was they pooled their land together. This is very interesting. They pooled their land together, okay, and then their commune, as in the group of farmers that have come together. In Russian, it was called mir. Okay, in Russian, it was called mir. So their commune divided it according to the needs. Of the individual family. Okay, needs of the individual family. Right, so this is something that was extremely unique about the Russian peasants. Okay, this was extremely unique about the Russian peasants, that they pooled their land together and then their commune divided it according to the needs of the individual family, which showed solidarity, which showed brotherhood, okay, which showed that the peasants cared about one another and were not really selfish, okay, they really respected one another in some way or the other, right? And this is where we are going to end today's session, by understanding what the Russian society looked like and the economy looked like. We would now be moving on to how socialism came to Russia in the next segment. Until then, kindly take care of yourselves, have a good day, and stay safe, and wishing you the best. Thank you.